there's a little bit of a drama going on, a little bit in my industry right now. There is a very respected and known fantasy artist who is very publicly parting ways with a longtime major client. And I don't want to get into the details of that. That's not what this is about. But watching the conversations that have been taking place around this, it makes me realize that there's a lot of people who maybe don't understand some of the standard practices of this business. And that is creating a lack of context, I think. And we can have better and more informed conversations and feelings and opinions about things, maybe if we have more information. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of things relating to being a genre illustrator and very specifically doing work on major global properties, anything that's trademarked, anything that's a franchise, superheroes, gaming companies, big properties, movies, things like that. Anything that has an established visual look and a brand recognition. So the issue, I think the core issue that a lot of people are maybe like a little fuzzy on is that these companies demand that you sign a work for hire contract. And I will explain what that is if you're not familiar. So normally when you create a piece of artwork, you are the owner of it, and it is at your discretion how you want other people to be allowed to use it. And so most clients who don't have these major brands, when you sign a contract with them to create an illustration for their book cover or whatever, they get to license it for a certain amount of time, certain types of usage. And then when that expires, if they want to use it again, they'll have to negotiate with you again. If somebody else wants to use it, they can negotiate with you. And ultimately, it's yours, you own it, you can do what you want. Work for hire, on the other hand, is a full transfer of ownership to whoever's hiring you to do it. You are an independent contractor, but once the job is done, you have no future interest in it unless there are some kind of extra considerations built into the contract. But generally speaking, once it's done, they own it, you don't own it, and you're not even legally the author of the work in work for hire. The company who's hiring you to do it is legally considered the author of the work. That's how extreme it is. So the question is, why would anyone ever sign a contract like this? The answer is, if you want to work on any major fandom that you can think of, if it's owned by a company, they are almost certainly going to require a work for hire. I would say it's practically unthinkable that any, especially like corporate owned intellectual property, is going to hire artists without demanding a work for hire be attached to it. It's not a good thing. It just is. And my opinion is that there is not a single artist alive who has the muscle and the sway to change those terms when it comes to working with a company like Disney. And Disney owns Marvel and 20th Century Fox and all kinds of other huge franchise owning sub-corporations. If you want to work on those properties, they're not going to hire you to do it and then let you own the rights to the images. They need to own everything. That is one of the kind of like the core components to how these businesses operate. I can't really imagine any situation. There would need to be some kind of seismic change in the power dynamic for that to be up for discussion. And since there is no hint of a collective bargaining situation for freelance illustrators anywhere on the horizon right now, I'm of the opinion that if you want to work on major IP stuff, you need to be okay with doing it as work for hire. Or you could do it as fan art, but that comes with its own legal risks and other downsides. So the other thing that was kind of brought up in a lot of these conversations is that with this particular company, that was being discussed, that their rates are essentially flat for decades now. The rate has changed somewhat, and some of the information I've been seeing shared is, I would say, not totally accurate, but I think it is fair to say that the rate has not kept up with inflation. And this is something that I think is across the board for all fantasy illustration. I think it's potentially across the board for all illustration of any kind. I don't necessarily know that, I only know the type of stuff that I do, the work I do, and I'm coming up on about 18 years working as a freelance genre illustrator, which means that I'm doing fantasy, sci-fi, horror, book covers, comic covers, trading cards, things like that. So, the rates that I'm getting paid are maybe marginally higher than when I started working. They're maybe marginally higher than when my mom, who's also a fantasy illustrator, started working. It hasn't changed in a long time, and it hasn't kept up with inflation. And that's a problem. I will say that rates are negotiable, whereas work for hire tends to be more of a take it or leave it, non-negotiable term with companies that employ that type of contract. Rates may or may not be negotiable. It depends on the company. That's an area where you do have more potential to come in and be able to renegotiate as opposed to work for hire, which I truly just think we're stuck with. So the question then is, like, why would anyone sign these contracts? You should make sure if you're signing that deal that you're getting something that makes it worthwhile. Let's say, for example, that you're going to be doing a work for hire job for a major ad firm. They're probably going to pay you a ton of money. Advertising jobs tend to pay very well. I don't personally do much, if any, advertising jobs, but I know folks who do, and they make bank on those. And that is really kind of to compensate for how bad the terms of the deal is. Otherwise, is you're going to make a ton of money and then you're going to go on to the next job. The companies that own these huge properties, they don't pay a ton of money. And so you need to ask, like, what other benefits are there? And I think really there's two that come to my mind. There's a third, which I feel like doesn't really count, but it's worth mentioning. So I'll just say that one first. It's not a business consideration, but emotionally, a lot of us got into this industry because we wanted to work on the things that we grew up as a fan of. And so emotionally, it might be meaningful to us to get to work on, a Marvel project or paint magic cards or things like that. There might be purpose and personal meaning behind that. I don't think that that's a reason to build your career around something, but I'm not going to pretend like it's not important and it's not there. But it's not a business decision necessarily. There is a business side to it. The business side is the reason you feel that way is because there are many, many, many people out there who also feel that way about that property. And when you then work on that property, you get a boost from being connected with it. So we're all scrambling as artists to get our work seen and to be appreciated and known. And it's important to our careers to be appreciated and known and seen. And when you get attached to a major property, that's an enormous boost that is hard to get otherwise. You're getting just slotted in and put in front of this pre-existing massive and usually very loyal and intense fan base. Another side of that, in addition to just being more visible and getting exposed to more fans, more potential clients, and that kind of thing. And when I say exposed, I don't mean paid in exposure in the way of some random fledgling company or indie project that's trying to get people to come on and work for low or no pay. with the promise of exposure. Exposure is only worth something if you can count on it. It's only worth something if it's real. And so, when you're talking about working on a project that you know is going to be reaching millions of people, that's real. And it's worth considering. I also make a good share of my income through sale of originals. And so that's another thing to consider, because the value of a painting is very tied in with the story that people connect to that painting. When I create personal works, or when I do non-commissioned personal series and things like that, it's on me to show other people why this is important and to create some kind of emotional connection. That's entirely on my shoulders, to get people to take it seriously, to buy into it. And when you are applying your talents to a pre-existing proven property, you are starting on third base. You've already been provided so much story, and working officially on that project is like a certificate of authenticity or a seal of approval from that company to tell other people, this guy is legit. This person is doing, we believe in this person. It's officially part of the thing now. And that adds a lot of value for collectors. The same painting, whether it is a piece of fan art or if it's a published piece by the company, will drastically change the value of the original. So that's something worth considering in deciding if this is worthwhile. And the other thing I think is that these companies tend to hire lots of artists on an ongoing basis. The need for assets, which is what we're creating for them, is assets for them to sell things. Their need for assets is constant. They always need to be hiring artists to create new work. They keep a lot of us, employed as freelancers. And the jobs that I've worked on over the years that are work for hire tend to be with companies that you can build long-term relationships with. Now, you could look at that and say, okay, but it's an exploitive relationship. And that is, I think, a fair point to make. But if you buy into the access to the big platform and building your own story as connecting with this pre-existing proven story and all that kind of stuff, then having long-term connection only strengthens that. And it also is nice to have clients that you can count on to always have new work coming up for you. I have worked with a lot of different kinds of clients over the years, and some of the folks that I really enjoy working with that have very favorable contract terms for the artists don't necessarily need a lot of art on a regular basis, and they're not hiring artists all that often. So while I'd love to just work for those clients, it's maybe not realistic, at least for me and for other folks I know, to only work for those clients. It's important for the consistency of work as we pay our bills month to month to have certain clients that you can kind of rely on to come back to. And again, when they have that built-in market of people who are going to want to buy an original or something, if that's part of your income, then that makes it all the more attractive. Another thing, and just a real quick thing, is that there is also usually some amount of concessions in these work for hire contracts that give artists some amount of use of their work. Usually it's not much. I would say most commonly you're just allowed to use it for self-promotion. Once the piece has been publicly released, you can put it online, you can make business cards, whatever. If you want to do anything more with it, like prints or put it in a book or something like that, you would have to negotiate with the company, and that might involve them just giving you their blessing. It might involve them saying, absolutely not. And it might be in the middle where you have to pay a licensing fee to do it. And it sucks to pay a licensing fee to use your own work, but part of the understanding that everybody should have in that situation is a big part of the appeal of these works is the fandoms that they are connected to, which is owned by the company that hired you. And so, it's just how it is. One of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this is just because I think it's important for people to understand the nuance of some of this. And especially, we can be frustrated at a company, we can be frustrated at the industry as a whole, but it doesn't do any good for people to have kind of half understood notions and then misapply that frustration. And that's kind of what I was seeing, is a lot of people taking issue with one particular company that is doing what I would consider to be business as usual for the entire industry. And I don't want to be an apologist for these practices. I would love for there to be some possibility or hope of making a change to them. I just would say that for my time in this industry, I don't see that as a current on the table prospect. And I think anybody who wants to do this work, or just if you're a fan of this work and you want to understand it better, it's worth knowing that and keeping that in mind as we make our choices going forward. And if you decide that this is a deal breaker and it's not the industry for you, you should be clear-eyed in knowing that it's the folks at the very top. These barriers exist for them too. And they might be able to negotiate more money or something like that, maybe, but they're still going to have to abide by those work for hire terms. It's just how it is. So in any case, I hope you hung in with me through all this, and I will catch you next time. Bye.